Hey folks, it's Paul Ramsay with another Quora question video response here. The question this time was actually I got tagged in on and asked to answer, which is always cool. And I'll give you a little screenshot here so you can read it along. How do I phrase a suggestion for self-hypnosis to overcome a phobia? Without using negative phrases, how can I phrase a suggestion for using in self-hypnosis? As I find it very hard right now to use only positive phrases to suggest myself not to fear something. This is smart. I like the way that this is the person who phrased this is coming at it from the right angle in their language around that. But here's the catch. You don't phrase a suggestion for self-hypnosis to overcome a phobia. First of all, to give the most complete response possible, hypnosis does not cure people, and it does not treat phobias. So if you have a truly diagnosed phobia, you should be going to a therapist, and you should be seeing a licensed therapist to handle that phobia. Now, if you're talking about what some people call in lay terms, they call a phobia is what we call a morbid fear. Like if you got a big fear response to something, which most people tend to call it a phobia, but technically a phobia is a diagnosed condition. If you think you have an almost like phobic response where you get really afraid of something and you want to use hypnosis to change it, the thing is, you can do that. You absolutely can use hypnosis for what most people would refer to as a phobia, right? But you can't do it by just creating one suggestion, in my opinion. I think what you're better off doing is finding a way to use what's called a reframe, right? You want to shift your perspective around the fear response in the first place. So I can give you an example. I had a client come to me once who had a fear of snakes. And what we did was we got him in hypnosis and we thought about some times. I said, tell me about a story in your life, a time when you were really, really afraid of snakes. And he actually remembered this memory from when he was a kid. And he was at a carnival place, and he got into the bumper cars, and his brother, thinking that he was funny, threw a rubber snake into the bumper car with him. And he didn't know it. Brother threw it in before he got in. And, so then he thought it was a real snake. And so what we were able to do, long story short, is we were able to take his adult understanding of that memory and reframe it to understand that there was really nothing to be afraid of the whole time, right? And once he understood that, he basically released that negative emotional response, and he wasn't afraid of snakes anymore. Now, I'll give you another example with a real live snake. I had a client who came to me who she owned like 10 acres of land and went down to the river, and she loved to go on these walks on her property, but she was afraid of coming across a snake. And so she had that happen before in real life, and she didn't want to do that. So she would never walk. She had all this land and she'd never walk her own property. So we put her in hypnosis, and basically we just did a simple shift of perspective. We thought about what would it be like to be a snake, and you're small and you're on the ground, and a big, huge human comes along, and you're afraid that they're going to step on you and squash you, and all of this multiple suggestions for creating an experience in which she saw herself as bigger and more powerful, and basically create empathy for the snake to be so small and threatened by a big, large human being. And once we did that, again, she could step outside of her old response, and she could create a new response in which she saw herself as a person of power, and where she had compassion for an animal that was smaller than her and maybe felt threatened. And then she knew that even if she came upon one by surprise, instead of immediately being afraid, she would just think, ooh, I'm going to be kind and careful for that poor animal and do my best not to scare it and cause it trauma or harm. Instead of fear, compassion. So we built multiple suggestions around creating a compassionate response instead of a fear response. And she went home that day and walked her property, no fear whatsoever. I actually followed up with her a year later, and she had been using her property that whole time. And just that little shift in perspective, sometimes what we tend to call in the business a reframe. So probably a suggestion for self-hypnosis to overcome a fear, not so much. Can you create multiples? Yes, you can. You should create as many as you can that help you get to that place of a new understanding of the fear. That's my answer for you. And so sit down and brainstorm. What is it that I'm really afraid of? Am I afraid of being out of control? Am I afraid of not being able to control every aspect of an experience? Am I afraid of not being important or powerful or significant? What is the emotional risk that you feel you are running? And how do you get yourself to let go of that and see it from a different angle? If you can do that, if you can create suggestions that do that, you will latch onto it because it feels so good to do so. But you got to have the right good feeling to replace the old bad feeling. So I hope that helps. That's it. Get out there and get it done. Good luck. I'm Paul Ramsay.